Hello, good afternoon. I'm Cheryl Blanchard. I'm the archaeologist for the Bureau of Land Management out of the Phoenix District Office, and this is the Lower Sonoran Field Office. And we've come out here today to the Sonoran Desert National Monument. On the monument here, it's 750,000 acres of land that was set aside, designated as a monument under a presidential proclamation that was signed in 2001. The place that we're standing right now we call Gap Well. It was a grazing corral for cattle. What's important about this monument, I think, is the fact that it was thought that it was an untrammeled Sonoran desert landscape that was worth preserving, that was worth taking care of. Indigenous people regard this as part of their traditional homeland, the Atam people. We have a number of different historic trails that come through the monument. The very earliest one was the Juan Bautista de Anza National Historic Trail. Anza came through, he was guided by indigenous people that lived here so that they could find their way through, going from east to west toward California. And in the 19th century, we had trails where people were going from the east coast of the United States and moving toward California, and they were coming through this area. So we've got the historic trails that are part of the monument objects that we take care of here in this monument. A lot of those trails overlap one another in the monument, which is interesting because it was a path that was easier to take through the mountains. We're going to continue our journey here on the Sonoran Desert National Monument to an interesting little place that I thought I would point out to you. There are a little pile of rocks behind me, some boulders. And on the boulders you might see some markings. It almost looks like a cross and another figure on there that could be a bird or a cross or something else. It's hard to know exactly, but it does give us clues that people from another time came through here on their way west or their way east along this historic trail. The Juan Bautista de Anza trail was followed during Spanish colonial times, 1775. While the Liberty Bell might have been ringing, we had people out here on what was actually owned by Spain at the time, and people that were working for the King of Spain were working very hard to find a way to bring a number of different colonists, families, and their livestock west to California, and in fact they were headed to Northern California to claim that area for the King of Spain and to establish a place where people would live. They would be able to subsist on their own because they knew they wouldn't be resupplied. So they brought their livestock with them. They brought their families with them. There were children. There were about 300 people that came along with Colonel Anza. A lot of the people walked much of the way. All of the children survived, and we're talking about even children that were born along this trip. They did survive. The infants even survived. There was only one woman who passed away on the along the trail, and she was the woman who had given birth but fell ill after that and passed away. But the rest of the company were able to make it to Northern California, and in fact they went all the way to what we now know as San Francisco. I'm also standing in the middle of what we believe is a segment of trail swale, which is where the 19th century wagons and stagecoaches were able to follow this same trail, but we can see indications that this is where a lot of the 19th century wagons and stagecoaches went. And in fact, some of the earlier trails, like the Mormon Battalion trail, were tasked with actually building parts of this route so that wheeled vehicles could get through, and you can see evidence of that in a number of places. At any rate, that's what we're standing in today, is just a little piece of that trail, a little piece of that history. I'm standing in front of a sign here that was commemorating the Mormon Battalion, and behind me also is a feature that marks part of what we're not sure exactly what it looked like when it was in operation. It's in a really neat place. It's just at the kind of the western end of the Butterfield Pass. The pass area starts to narrow then as we go through the Maricopa Mountains, and it's quite scenic. Well, we're going to continue on the last leg of our Historic Trails journey today. We're kind of on the east side of Butterfield Pass through the Maricopa Mountains, the North Maricopa Mountains. The trail skirts the edge of the wilderness, and then the trail takes up from this point, just on the sort of the Bajada area, sort of the low rise hills of the Maricopas, and it goes on toward the east, and it flattens out a little bit into this little valley. And if we were to follow the trail 5 or 6 miles more, we would come to what is known as the west prong of Waterman Wash, and that was an area that is close to where a camp was set up when Mormon Battalion trail was being used. The Mormon Battalion was, of course, headed west to California to try to secure California from the Spanish and Mexicans and the 1840s. And they came through here, and so they camped at a place around Christmas Day. So they came to name that place Christmas Camp. And that's an area that today is very popular for youth groups and scout groups to come out and camp and have events. It's been my pleasure to bring you through a really lovely portion of the Sonoran Desert National Monument. These trails tell such a story about hardship, but about endurance and about people's will to go on to another place and find a better life for themselves.